Okay, so we need to remove the scale on this bar of steel. Like I mentioned before, I have a surface ground bar, but if you don't have a surface ground bar, we have this scale on the outer surface. I've set up my grinder to rest the flat platen on it. It's just a hard backing instead of using the round contact wheel. Some people will want to come in and they will want to use the round contact wheel and grind off that scale. And that can be done, but one thing that can happen is you can make it thicker and thinner in some areas. So you won't get it as flat as you will by doing it this way. I have a little magnet that I got from Texas Knife Supply, and that's going to be our holder. And I'm using a 60 grit Norton Blaze belt. These Norton Blaze belts are very, very aggressive. So if you've never used one before, be careful if you switch over to it. It's going to remove a whole lot more steel than you anticipate. So this is actually a used one. It's going to be enough to get the job done. And we're going to start with this, and then you take it through different stages. Through this one, the 60, go through to 220, and 320, and then 400. But we're just going to go ahead and start off. I've got the grinder set at about 60-65% speed. You don't have to, obviously if you don't have a variable speed grinder, this can be done full speed. It's just easier on a variable speed, so you control your speed that way. Make sure you have your goggles on, and we'll get started here. Now, as you can see, I'm only hitting in certain areas. This bar isn't perfectly flat, so it's going to take a while to go in and get all this smoothed down and get it planed, all right, and get it trued up. Now that you have the general idea of how to do that, you'll just continue doing this and taking it through a bit longer on this belt and then through other belts, and you get all that pitting out of there. Okay, now I'm going to go over to the surface grinder, and I'm going to show you how to do this on the surface grinder. Like I mentioned during our shop tour, this is the surface grinder, and the surface grinder is going to do the same thing as what we were doing with the platen over there on the grinder, surfacing this other side of this bar. Now, I'm just going to go in and give a little demonstration. We're not going to surface grind this entire thing, but I'm just going to let you see what the surface grinder can do. Now, this sets on a magnet. Make sure the magnet is clean, doesn't have any trash on it, any residue. Make sure it's clean. Get that on there. And this is a fine pole magnet, so it's going to be very, very powerful. I'm going to engage that. It's not an electromagnet, okay? Now that is not going to go anywhere. Now, the surface grinder, this table moves in your X axis and in your Y axis. So you can see that this is moving away from me and going toward the underside of this wheel. Make sure if you have a wheel that it's a hard durometer, preferably a 90 durometer. Make sure it's really hard so it'll be nice and true. Some people use stones on here. I don't like stones because a stone can have a hairline fracture in it and you might not know it, and if you bind it up and you're taking off too much steel off that, it can explode and send shrapnel everywhere. So I converted this into a belt grinder. But whenever you're surface grinding, you want to take off just a thousandth or two, maybe 3/1000ths of an inch at a time. And that is over here. You can come in and raise and lower this by just this has little numbers over here, and each number is 1/1000th of an inch. Okay, so whenever you're setting this up, you want to make sure that it is barely touching or almost touching. Okay, that's just barely just making some nicks. Okay, now if you want to take off a lot of steel, like 4 or 5 or maybe 6/1000ths of an inch, make sure this belt is really fresh and really aggressive, and you're going to come in and set it up to where you take off a few thousandths of an inch, you move it over on your y-axis a little bit, take off a few thousandths of an inch all the way down, move it over a little bit, and repeat. If you go in and you try to set this up to where you're taking off too much at one point, you're trying to cover too much surface area, and you're going to bind your machine up, break a belt in there, break this belt, and overheat your steel to where it'll warp. Okay, so just take off a little bit at a time. And this is a hydraulic machine, so it's going to go from right to left or on my x-axis automatically for me. Make sure you have this locked down. I went to a guy's shop one time. He had a steel plate attached over here and had all these dents in it from whenever he forgot to lock it down. So make sure this is locked down. Make sure everything is well ventilated around you, and make sure you have your goggles on. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and jog this and get it started. Turn it on. Messed up. Now, whenever you need to change the height, you need to take off more steel, make sure you take it off when it's on this end. Okay, if you take it off and you change your height on here and you take it off on this end, it's going to be climbing uphill trying to take off steel. Do it on this side, and so it'll remove it easier if it's going back through there. So now that you have the general idea of what a surface grinder is, we can go ahead and get started on making that blank.